Get raided, huh? Welcome in, Dragon King, and thank you for the raid. Hello,
Hi.
everyone. Welcome back. Hello, Slav. How's it going? Um, so we are returning to fairy tales that every child should know. We're gonna try and get through as much of this we can this week and next week because I will be leaving. Going on a week-long excursion trip to the other end of the country, and I'll be back on the week of the 2nd of June. So, let's see here. We are going to start with Tom Thumb today. Quick shout out to everyone that's here. Looks like Almontas, Deus, Dragon King. Thank you for sharing your community with me. If you are not familiar with who I am and what I do, I am Vexing Cat. You can call me Vex or Vexing Cat and Miss Vex if you're being very naughty. And I read classic literature and poetry, and I am a PNG tuber that is, as you can see here. And let me think, anything else? I am part of a VTuber group called Underrealm. I'm part of Gen 2. A lot of streamers are part of the group. There's a total of 12 streamers and one administrator, so 13 all in all. Good people. If you need to know more about Underrealm, you can come check out our Discord server or our socials. Do exclamation point Underrealm, 1R, and you can check that out. Let me think. I am currently reading Fairy Tales Every Child Should Know. We're about 2/3 of the way through the book. And yeah, we'll read Tom Thumb, Bluebeard, and possibly a third chapter because each one of these is about 10 pages. So let's get to it, shall we? Let's see here. Da 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 da. And we shouldn't have to deal with ads for a while, thankfully. There we go. In the days of King Arthur Merlin. Oh, while I'm thinking about it. Chapter 12, Tom Thumb. There we go. In the days of King Arthur, Merlin, the most learned enchanter of his time, was on a journey, and, being very weary, stopped one day at the cottage of an honest ploughman to ask for refreshment. The ploughman's wife, with great civility, immediately brought him some milk in a wooden bowl and some brown bread on a wooden platter. Merlin could not help observing that, although everything within the cottage was particularly neat and clean and in good order, the ploughman and his wife had the most sorrowful air imaginable. So he questioned them on the cause of their melancholy, and learned that they were very miserable because they had no children. The poor woman declared, with tears in her eyes, that she should be the happiest creature in the world if she had a son, although he were no bigger than his father's thumb. Merlin was much amused with the thoughts of a boy no bigger than a man's thumb, and as soon as he returned home he sent for the Queen of the Fairies, with whom he was very intimate, and related to her the desire of the ploughman and his wife to have a son the size of his father's thumb. The Queen of the Fairies liked the plan exceedingly, and declared their wish should speedily be granted. Accordingly, the ploughman's wife had a son, who in a few minutes grew as tall as his father's thumb. The Queen of the Fairies came in at the window as the mother was sitting up in bed, admiring the child. The Queen kissed the infant, and giving it the name of Tom Thumb, immediately summoned several fairies from fairyland to clothe her little new favorite. An oak leaf hat he had for his crown. His shirt it was by spiders spun, with doublet wove of thistles down. His trousers up, with points were down. His stockings of apple rind they tie, with eyelash plucked from his mother's eye. His shoes were made of a mouse's skin, nicely tanned, with the hair within. Tom never was any bigger than his father's thumb, which was not a large thumb either. But as he grew older, he became very cunning and sly, for which his mother did not sufficiently correct him, so that when he was able to play with the boys for cherry stones and had lost all his own, he used to creep into the boys' bags, fill his pockets, and come out again to play. But one day, as he was getting out of a bag of cherry stones, the boy to whom it belonged chanced to see him. "Aha, my little Tom Thumb," said the boy, "have I caught you at your bad tricks at last? Now I will reward you for thieving." Then, drawing the string tight round his neck, and shaking the bag heartily, the cherry stones bruised Tom's legs, thighs, and body sadly, which made him beg to be let out, and promise never to be guilty of such things any more. Shortly afterwards, Tom's mother was making a batter pudding, and that he might see how she mixed it, he climbed on the edge of the bowl, but his foot happening to slip, he fell over head and ears into the batter, and his mother, not observing him, stirred him into the pudding, and popped him into the pot to boil. The hot water made Tom kick and struggle, and his mother, seeing the pudding jump up and down in such a furious manner, thought it was bewitched, and a tinker coming by just at that time, she quickly gave him the pudding, who put it into his budget and walked on. Put it into his budget. Put it into his budget. Put it into his budget. I swear, to be fair, this book was written, or a collection of stories was put together in 1905, so it's just very, very strange. Also, hi Guts, welcome in. As soon as Tom could get the batter out of his mouth, he began to cry aloud, which so frightened the poor tinker that he flung the pudding over the hedge and ran away from it as fast as he could run. The pudding being broken to pieces by the fall, Tom was released and walked home to his mother, who gave him a kiss and put him to bed. Tom Thumb's mother once took him with her when she went to milk the cow, and it being a very windy day, she tied him with a needleful of thread to a thistle, that he might not be blown away. The cow, liking his oak leaf hat, took him and the thistle up at one mouthful. While the cow chewed the thistle, Tom, terrified at her great teeth, which seemed ready to crush him to pieces, roared, "Mother, mother!" as loud as he could bawl. "Where are you, Tommy, my dear Tommy?" said the mother. "Here, mother, here in the red cow's mouth." The mother began to cry and wring her hands, but the cow, surprised at such odd noises in her throat, opened her mouth and let him drop out. His mother clapped him into her apron and ran home with him. Tom's father made him a whip of barley straw to drive the cattle with, and being one day in the field, he slipped into a deep furrow. A raven flying over picked him up with a grain of corn and flew with him to the top of a giant's castle by the seaside, where he left him. And old Grumbo the giant, coming soon after to walk upon his terrace, swallowed Tom like a pill, clothes and all. Tom presently made the giant very uncomfortable, and he threw him up into the sea. A great fish then swallowed him. The fish was soon after caught and sent as a present to King Arthur. This is the most convoluted story I've read to date. When it was cut open, everybody? Why is that not a conjunction? Anyway, when it was cut open, everybody was delighted with little Tom Thumb. The king made him his dwarf. Oh, God. He was the favorite of the whole court, and by his merry pranks often amused the queen and the knights of the Round Table. The king, when he rode on horseback, frequently took Tom in his hand, and if a shower of rain came on, he used to creep into the king's waistcoat pocket and sleep till the rain was over. Thank you, Monoma. The king also sometimes questioned Tom concerning his parents, and when Tom informed his majesty they were very poor people, the king led him into his treasury and told him he should pay his friends a visit, and take with him as much money as he could carry. Tom procured a little purse, and putting a threepenny piece into it with much labor and difficulty, got it upon his back, and after traveling 2 days and nights, arrived at his father's house. His mother met him at the door, almost tired to death, having in 48 hours traveled almost half a mile with a huge silver threepence upon his back. His parents were glad to see him, especially when he had brought such an amazing sum of money with him. They placed him in a walnut shell by the fireside, and feasted him for 3 days upon a hazelnut, which made him sick, for a whole nut usually served him a month. Tom got well, but could not travel because it had rained. Therefore his mother took him in her hand, and with one puff blew him into King Arthur's court, where Tom entertained the king, queen, and nobility at tilts and tournaments, at which he exerted himself so much that he brought on a fit of sickness, and his life was despaired of. Hey, cooks, welcome in. At this juncture, the queen of the fairies came in a chariot drawn by flying mice, placed Tom by her side, and drove through the air without stopping till they arrived at her palace, when, after restoring him to health and permitting him to enjoy all the gay diversions of fairyland, the queen commanded a fair wind, and placing Tom before it, blew him straight to the court of King Arthur. But just as Tom should have alighted in the courtyard of the palace, the cook happened to pass along with the king's great bowl of furmity. King Arthur loved furmity. And poor Tom Thumb fell plump into the middle of it, and splashed the hot furmity into the cook's eyes. Down went the bowl. Oh dear, cried Tom. Murder, murder, bellowed the cook, and away ran the king's nice furmity into the kennel. The cook was a red-faced, cross fellow, and swore to the king that Tom had tried it out of mere mischief, had done it out of mere mischief. So he was taken up, tried, and sentenced to be beheaded. Tom, hearing this dreadful sentence, and seeing a miller stand by with his mouth wide open, he took a good spring and jumped down the miller's throat, unperceived by all, even by the miller himself. Is anybody keeping track of how convoluted this is? Like, how big? So he was the size of his father's thumb, which, let's say it was smaller than the average man's. So it would still be about the size of my thumb. And how would that fit inside of a walnut shell? How would that go down without anybody notice? There's so many questions. So many questions. Okay, moving on. Tom, being lost, the court broke up, and away went the miller to his mill. But Tom did not leave him long at rest. He began to roll and tumble about, so that the miller thought himself bewitched, and sent for a doctor. When the doctor came, Tom began to dance and sing. The doctor was as much frightened as the miller, and sent in great haste for 5 more doctors and 20 learned men. While all these were debating upon the affair, the miller, for they were very tedious, happened to yawn, and Tom, taking the opportunity, made another jump and alighted on his feet in the middle of the table. The miller, provoked to be thus tormented by such a little creature, fell into a great passion, caught hold of Tom, and threw him out of the window into the river. A large salmon swimming by snapped him up in a minute. The salmon was soon caught and sold in the market to the steward of the lord. The lord, thinking it an uncommon fine fish, made a present of it to the king, who ordered it to be dressed immediately. When the cook cut open the salmon, he found poor Tom, and ran with him directly to the king. But the king, being busy with state affairs, desired that he might be brought another day. The cook, resolving to keep him safely this time, as he had so lately given him the slip, clapped him into a mouse-trap, and left him to amuse himself by peeping through the wires for a whole week. When the king sent for him, he forgave him for throwing down the furmity, ordered him new clothes, and knighted him. How did we get here? I'm so baffled by this version of Tom Thumb. Absolutely chaotic. His shirt was made of butterflies' wings. His boots were made of chicken skins. His coat and breeches were made with pride. A tailor's needle hung by his side. A mouse for a horse he used to ride. Thus dressed and mounted, he rode a-hunting with the king and nobility, who all laughed heartily at Tom and his fine prancing steed. As they rode by a farmhouse one day, a cat jumped from behind the door, seized the mouse and little Tom, and began to devour the mouse. However, Tom boldly drew his sword and attacked the cat, who then let him fall. The king and his nobles, seeing Tom falling, went to his assistance, and one of the lords caught him in his hat. But poor Tom was sadly scratched, and his clothes were torn by the claws of the cat. In this condition he was carried home, when a bed of down was made for him in a little ivory cabinet. The queen of the fairies came, and took him again to fairyland, where she kept him for some years, and then, dressing him in bright green, sent him flying once more through the air to the earth, in the days of King Thunstone. The people flocked far and near to look at him, and the king, before whom he was carried, asked him who he was, whence he came, and where he lived. Tom answered, "My name is Tom Thumb, from the fairies I come. When King Arthur shone, this court was my home. In me he delighted, by him I was knighted. Did you never hear of Sir Thomas Thumb?" The king was so charmed with this address that he ordered a little chair to be made, in order that Tom might sit on his table, and also a palace of gold, a span high, with a door an inch wide, for little Tom to live in. He also gave him a coach drawn by 6 small mice. This made the queen angry, because she had not a new coach too. Therefore, resolving to ruin Tom, she complained to the king that he had behaved very insolently to her. The king sent for him in a rage. Tom, to escape his fury, crept into an empty snail shell, and there lay till he was almost starved, when, peeping out of the shell, he saw a fine butterfly settled on the ground. He now ventured out, and getting astride, the butterfly took wing and mounted into the air with little Tom on his back. Away he flew from field to field, from tree to tree, till at last he flew to the king's court. The king, queen, and nobles all strove to catch the butterfly, but could not. At length poor Tom, having neither bridle nor saddle, slipped from his seat and fell into a white pot, where he was found almost drowned. The queen vowed he should be guillotined, but while the guillotine was getting ready, he was secured once more in a mousetrap, when the cat, seeing something stir, and supposing it to be a mouse, patted the trap about till she broke it, and set Tom at liberty. Soon afterwards a spider, taking him for a fly, made at him. Tom drew his sword and fought valiantly, but the spider's poisonous breath overcame him. He fell dead on the ground where late he had stood, and the spider sucked up the last drop of his blood. King Thunstone and his whole court went into mourning for little Tom Thumb. They buried him under a rosebush and raised a nice white marble monument over his grave, with the following epitaph. Here lies Tom Thumb, King Arthur's knight, who died by spider's cruel bite. He was well known in Arthur's court, where he afforded gallant sport. He rode at tilt and tournament, and on a mouse hunting went. Alive he filled the court with mirth. His death to sorrow soon gave birth. Wipe your eyes, and shake your head, and cry, alas, Tom Thumb is dead. The Goblicorn! Hey, Nex, welcome in. Can I get a shout for Nex, if somebody has a second? Let's see. That was kind of a wild story. I was left with so many questions. Like, genuinely, very confusing story. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Here, hang on a second. Okay, so my food from my order earlier just arrived. I got it, so we're good. Okay. Food for later. Where was I? Okay, so we're on to chapter 13, Bluebeard, which, if you're not familiar, is, I believe, a Charles Perrault story of piracy and shenanigans at sea. A gentleman pirate, very rich, if memory serves. Let's see here. What we got? Any craziness? I think Monoma stepped away, so let me do the shout out. The Goblicorn. There we go. So if you guys are not familiar with the Goblicorn, he is a variety streamer. Looks like you were just playing Bloodborne. I think I've seen you more recently than that. You were playing Repo the other day with Valkyrie and the Bountiful Vermin and some other rattos. Let's see if it'll actually play. Go Gadget. There it is.
I like a large, thick wiener.
Yep. Malkrub, the Bug Skipper, Valkyrie, Bountiful Vermin.
What?
There's two more there I don't recognize, but very kind, amazing goblin, bit of a himbo. We love that about him. Like I said, variety streamer, super chill guy. If you guys are not already following him, I say give him a chance. Go check him out. He's just around the corner from hitting 1,000 too. That could be you. You could be his 1,000th follower. All right, let's see. Next chapter. So, chapter 13, Bluebeard. There was, some time ago, a gentleman who was very rich. He had fine town and country houses. His dishes and plates were all of gold or silver. His rooms were hung with damask. His chairs and sofas were covered with the richest silks, and his carriages were all gilt with gold in grand style. But it happened that this gentleman had a blue beard, which made him so very frightful and ugly that none of the ladies in the parts where he lived would venture to go into his company. Now there was a certain lady of rank who lived very near him and had 2 daughters, both of them of very great beauty. Bluebeard asked her to bestow one of them upon him for a wife, and left it to herself to choose which of the two it should be. But both the young ladies again and again said they would never marry Bluebeard. Yet, to be as civil as they could, each of them said the only reason why she would not have him was because she was loath to hinder her sister from the match, which would be such a good one for her. Still, the truth of the matter was that they could neither of them bear the thoughts of having a husband with a blue beard. And besides, they had heard of his having been married to several wives before, and nobody could tell what had ever become of any of them. Methinks this is not the Bluebeard story that I know, and it is something else, and that's fair. As Bluebeard wished very much to gain their favor, he asked the lady and her daughters and some ladies who were on a visit at their house to go with him to one of his country seats, where they spent a whole week, during which they passed all their time in nothing but parties for hunting and fishing, music and dancing and feasts. No one even thought of going to bed, and the nights were passed in merry makings of all kinds. In short, the time rolled on in so much pleasure that the youngest of the two sisters began to think that the beard which she had been so much afraid of was not so very blue, and that the gentleman who owned it was vastly civil and pleasing. Soon after their return home, she told her mother that she had no longer any dislike to accept of Bluebeard for her husband, and in a very short time they were married. About a month after the marriage had taken place, Bluebeard told his wife that he should be forced to leave her for a few weeks, as he had some affairs to attend to in the country. He desired her to be sure to indulge herself in every kind of pleasure, to invite as many of her friends as she liked, and to treat them with all sorts of dainties, that her time might pass pleasantly till he came back. Here, said he, are the keys of the two large wardrobes. This is the key of the great box that contains the best plate, which we use for company. This belongs to my strong box, where I keep my money, and this belongs to the casket, in which are all of my jewels. Here also is a master key to all the rooms in the house, but this small key belongs to the closet at the end of the long gallery on the ground floor. I give you leave, said he, to open or to do what you like with all the rest except this closet. This, my dear, you must not enter, nor even put the key into the lock for all the world. If you do not obey me in this one thing, you must expect the most dreadful punishments. She promised to obey his orders in the most faithful manner, and Bluebeard, after kissing her tenderly, stepped into his coach and drove away. When Bluebeard was gone, the friends of his wife did not wait to be asked. So eager were they to see all the riches and fine things she had gained by marriage, for they had none of them gone to the wedding, on account of their dislike to the Bluebeard of the bridegroom. As soon as ever they came to the house, they ran about from room to room, from closet to closet, and then from wardrobe to wardrobe. You got it, Talk. Welcome in, Talk. For those of you not familiar with Takukak, he is another Alaskan VTuber, and he and I and a few other Alaskan streamers will be doing a collab next week. If I could get a shout for Talk when you have a second, Manama, that would be amazing. Where was I? Wardrobe to wardrobe. And then, from wardrobe to wardrobe, looking into each with wonder and delight, and said that every fresh one they came to was richer and finer than what they had seen the moment before. At last they came to the drawing rooms, where their surprise was made still greater by the costly grandeur of the hangings, the sofas, the
I'm heading for
chairs.
my
Oh,
way.
there we go.
Right lane. Boy. Damn it.
I am not familiar with what that game is, but that looked interesting. I am, however, very familiar with Dredge. Dredge is a great game. 10 out of 10. If you guys are not already following Talk, I would definitely check him out and give him a follow. Um, Absolutely chill vibes. Maybe that's a common effect with Alaskan streamers, or just, I don't know, calm, I guess. All we're surrounded by nature and we're just chill. Or maybe it's the cold that makes us chill. I don't know. I can only begin to speculate. All right. Let's see, where was I? Yes, I think it was a wizard slinging some spells. You had like a purple circle on your back, and you rode in with like 6 armored individuals. I'm not really sure. Let's see. Um, predecessor. MOBA. Oh, okay. Multiplayer online battle arena. Okay. Not familiar. Cool. Thank you. At last they came to the drawing rooms, where their surprise was made still greater by the costly grandeur of the hangings, the sofas, the chairs, carpets, tables, sideboards, and looking glasses. The frames of these last were silver gilt, most richly adorned, and in the glasses they saw themselves from head to foot. Ah, thank you for the head pats. The frames of these last were silver gilt, most richly adorned, and in the glasses they saw themselves from head to foot. In short, nothing could exceed the richness of what they saw, and they all did not fail to admire and envy the good fortune of their friend. But all this time the bride herself was far from thinking about the fine speeches they made to her, for she was eager to see what was in the closet her husband had told her not to open. Plot device! Oh no. So great indeed was her desire to do this, that without once thinking how rude it would be to leave her guests, she slipped away down a private staircase that led to this forbidden closet, and in such a hurry that she was 2 or 3 times in danger of falling down stairs and breaking her neck. When she reached the door of the closet, she stopped for a few moments to think of the order her husband had given her, and how he had told her that he would not fail to keep his word and punish her very severely if she did not obey him. But she was so very curious to know what was inside that she made up her mind to venture in spite of everything. She then, with a trembling hand, put the key into the lock, and the door straight flew open. As the window shutters were closed, she at first could see nothing, but in a short time she saw that the floor was covered with clotted blood, on which the bodies of several dead women were lying. These were all the wives whom Bluebeard, I don't know why that was so hard to say, These were all the wives whom Bluebeard had married and killed one after another. At this sight, she was ready to sink with fear, and the key of the closet door, which she held in her hand, fell on the floor. When she had a little got the better of, oh, that sentence is gross. When she had a little got the better of, oh, that sentence is so bad. When she had a little got the better of her fright, she took it up, locked the door, and made haste back to her own room, that she might have a little time to get into a humor, to amuse her company. But this she could not do. So great was her fright at what she had seen, as she found that the key of the closet had got stained with blood in. In falling on the floor, she wiped it 2 or 3 times over to clean it, yet still the blood kept on it the same as before. She next washed it, but the blood did not move at all. She then scoured it with brick dust and after with sand, but in spite of all she could do, the blood was still there, for the key was a fairy who was Bluebeard's friend, so that as fast as she got off the blood on one side, it came again on the other. Early in the same evening, Bluebeard came home, saying that before he had gone far on his journey, he was met by a horseman, who was coming to tell him that his affair in the country was settled without his being present, upon which his wife said everything she could think of to make him believe she was in a transport of joy at his sudden return. The next morning he asked her for the keys. She gave them to him, but as she could not help showing her fright, Bluebeard easily guessed what had been the matter. "How is it," said he, "that the key of the closet upon the ground floor is not here?" "Is it not?" said the wife. "Then I must have left it on my dressing table. Be sure you give it to me by and by," replied Bluebeard. After going a good many times backwards and forwards, as if she was looking for the key, she was at last forced to give it to Bluebeard. He looked hard at it, and then said, "How came this blood upon the key?" "I am sure I do not know," replied the poor lady, at the same time turning as white as a sheet. "You do not know," said Bluebeard sternly, "but I know well enough. You have been in the closet on the ground floor. Very well, madam. Since you are so mighty fond of this closet, you shall be sure to take your place among the ladies you saw there." His wife, who was almost dead with fear, now fell upon her knees, asked his pardon 1,000 times for her fault, and begged him to forgive her, looking all the time so very mournful and lovely that she would have melted any heart that was not harder than a rock. But Bluebeard only said, "No, no, madam, you shall die this very minute. Alas," said the poor trembling creature, "if I must die, give me at least a little time to say my prayers." "I give you," replied the cruel Bluebeard, "half a quarter of an hour. Not a moment longer."
Link's TS
Oh
just
my.
rated with 52
Link.
viewers.
Link's TS, welcome in. Oh, wow. Hello. Hello, Raiders. I don't know much French, but I think would be enchanté. Welcome in, bonjour. Hello, hello, welcome in, Raiders. Hi, I am Vexen Cat, a tiger librarian. I read classic literature and poetry, and today I am reading fairy tales that every child should know. Ah, there we go. Oh, you were vibing there. Looks like you're having fun. Wonderful. A half of a quarter of an hour, yes. 7.5 minutes. That's oddly specific. Yes, that is true. So yes, welcome in, Raiders. If you need a moment, links, please take a second to hydrate, caffeinate, grab a snack. I know if you're in France, it must be quite late. So I hope you take time to take care of yourself. But yes, we're currently reading the story of Bluebeard. And he's just discovered that his wife had used the one key she wasn't supposed to use to go into the closet where all of his previous wives had been murdered. So we'll have to see where it goes from here. Let's see. Alas, said the poor trembling creature, if I must die, give me at least a little time to say my prayers. I give you, replied the cruel Bluebeard, half a quarter of an hour, not a moment longer. When Bluebeard had left her to herself, she called her sister, and after telling her, as well as she could for sobbing, that she had but half a quarter of an hour to live, prithee, said she, Sister Anne, this was her sister's name, run up to the top of the tower and see if my brothers are not in sight, for they said they would visit me today. And if you see them, make a sign for them to gallop on as fast as ever they can. Hey, Shuttered, welcome in. Let's see, where was I? Got lost in the sauce. Prithee, said she, Sister Anne, this was her sister's name, run up to the top of the tower and see if my brothers are not in sight, for they said they would visit me today, and if you see them, make a sign for them to gallop on as fast as ever they can. Her sister straight did as she was desired, and the poor trembling lady every minute cried out to her, Anne, Sister Anne, do you see anyone coming? Her sister said, I see nothing but the sun, which makes a dust, and the grass, which looks green. Oh, you're quite all right, Shuttered. I'm doing quite well. I hope you are, too. In the meanwhile, Bluebeard, with a great scimitar in his hand? Scimitar. Oh, is that a weird spelling? I'm not sure what that word is. Scimitar. Let's find out. Scimitar. Useful links.
Snack time!
Fair enough. Let's see. Dictionary. Don't forget to stretch. No, that is definitely how they spelled it. Cimeter. All right, we shall Google it. Oh, it's a type of blade. It's like a carved butcher's knife. A scimitar or scimitar is a large, curved butcher's knife with a blade typically between 20 centimeters and 35 or 8 to 14 inches. Anything to, not be anything to not be in meters, in metric, right? So oh, hello, Forrest. Oh my goodness. Forrest Cabin reads everyone. This is
My God, I
another
just broke it.
booktuber.
It's worth 3,800.
Oh Lord. Okay, be careful.
Oh,
no!
Oh no, it's all over.
I'm sorry, but oh shit.
Oof.
What are you
we would have died.
We're gonna be broke by the end of this challenge.
Bruh,
Oh, man,
we're
Reaper's
never
such a
gonna make
great
it out of
game.
here.
It is so much fun. Welcome in. I hope all of you wonderful raiders are here. Enjoy a good story. I'm currently reading about Bluebeard. If you're not familiar with me or my content, I am Vexing Cat. You can call me Vex or Vexing. I am a tiger librarian VTuber, and I read classic literature and poetry. And today I'm reading Fairy Tales Every Child Should Know. We are in chapter 13, I believe, and this is the story of Bluebeard, which is written by Charles Perrault, French author. Huh, how oddly appropriate. It's good seeing you too, Andy. Let's see. In the meanwhile, Bluebeard, with a great scimitar in his hand, bawled as loud as he could to his wife, "Come down at once, or I will fetch you." "One moment longer, I beseech you," replied she, and again called softly to her sister, "Sister Anne, do you see anyone coming?" To which she answered, "I see nothing but the sun, which makes a dust, and the grass which looks green." No, I love you tons. I need one of those Uno reverse emotes. Would be appropriate, I think. Hi. Hello. I love you how you have two very distinct tones. The cozy one for reading and the very almost leader-like voice. It's like, "Come on, children, onto the ship. Make sure you have your lunch boxes." Yes, they're slightly different tones and inflections for sure. Cozy up. Make sure to take care of yourself. Hydrate yourself. And let's continue the story. We're almost done with this first one. Or second one today. Bluebeard now again bawled out, "Come down, I say, this very moment, or I shall come to fetch you." "I am coming, indeed, I will come in 1 minute," sobbed his wretched wife. Then she once more cried out, "Anne, Sister Anne, do you see anyone coming?" "I see," said her sister, "a cloud of dust a little to the left." "Do you think it is my brother?" "It is my brother," said the wife. "Alas, no, dear sister," replied she. "It is only a flock of sheep." "Will you come down, madam?" said Bluebeard in the greatest rage. "Only one single moment more," said she, and then she called out for the last time, "Sister Anne, Sister Anne." "Do you see no one coming?" "I see," replied her sister, "2 men on horseback coming, but they are still a great way off." "Thank God," cried she, "they are my brothers. Beckon them to make haste." Bluebeard now cried out so loud for her to come down that his voice shook the whole house. The poor lady, with her hair loose and all in tears, now came down and fell on her knees, begging him to spare her life. But he stopped her, saying, "All this is of no use, for you shall die." And then, seizing her by the hair, raised his scimitar to strike off her head. The poor woman now begged a single moment to say one prayer. "No, no," said Bluebeard, "I will give you no more time. You have had too much already." And again he raised his arm. Just at this instant a loud knocking was heard at the gates, which made Bluebeard wait for a moment to see who it was. The gates now flew open, and 2 officers dressed in their uniform came in, and with their swords in their hands ran straight to Bluebeard, who, seeing they were his wife's brothers, tried to escape from their presence. But they pursued and seized him before he had gone 20 steps, and plunging their swords into his body, he fell down dead at their feet. The poor wife, who was almost as dead as her husband, was not able at first to rise and embrace her brothers. But she soon came to herself, and as Bluebeard had no heirs, she found herself the owner of his great riches. She gave a part of his vast fortune as a marriage dowry to her sister Anne, who soon after became the wife of a young gentleman who had long loved her. Some of the money she laid out in buying captain's commissions for her two brothers, and the rest she gave to a worthy gentleman whom she married shortly after, and whose kind treatment soon made her forget Bluebeard's cruelty. Well, that was interesting. Oh my goodness. Also, welcome in Lightning Builder. That was an interesting story. I didn't know what to expect there, but that was an interesting one. Let's see here. Grab this, close that. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I have a little bit of a snack. And no, I am not the snack. Let's see. Delicious. A brewery that I often frequent is running a new special menu this month. And I'm having the esquite. So instead of mesquite, like the wood, it's esquite. And it's kind of I don't know how to describe this. It's like a spicy Mexican dip with jalapenos, corn, cilantro, and some various other ingredients that I cannot identify in this sauce. But it's good. It was worth trying. Munch, munch, munch. So, we're on to chapter 14. Cinderella or the Little Glass Slipper. Is this also a Charles Perrault? I think it is, isn't it? Very, very prolific author, Charles Perrault. I'm not sure how many of the stories were his original ideas and versus ones that he collected himself. Because, like, the brothers Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm collected stories, and a number of them were from Charles Perrault. Bear with me a second. Let's go look at that. So, Bluebeard was Charles Perrault. Also, okay, so the next few stories are all by Charles Perrault. And originally translated from the French tale, yeah. So these are all Charles Perrault stories for now. There is thank you, Lightning Builder. Thank you for the follow.
Lightning Builder just followed.
And then we have a British story, Jack the Giant Killer. I'm not sure about Robert Southey. That's also probably British. And Hans Christian Andersen, I believe, is Danish, memory serves. George MacDonald is Scottish, and Madame Gabrielle de Villeneuve. This sounds very Spanish. I'm not sure. Beauty and the Beast. I did not realize that was a Spanish story. That's fascinating. I digress. We are on to chapter 14. Thank you for the head pats. Cinderella, or the Little Glass Slipper. There was once a very rich gentleman who lost his wife, and having loved her exceedingly, he was very sorry when she died. Finding himself quite unhappy for her loss, he resolved to marry a second time, thinking by this means he should be as happy as before. Unfortunately, however, the lady he chanced to fix upon was the proudest and most haughty woman ever known. She was always out of humor with everyone. Nobody could please her, and she returned the civilities of those about her with the most affronting disdain. She had 2 daughters by a former husband. These she brought up to be proud and idle. Indeed, in temper and behavior, they perfectly resembled their mother. They did not love their books, and would not learn to work. In short, they were disliked by everybody. I mean, how can you not love books? That's just absurd. The gentleman on his side, too, had a daughter, who, in sweetness of temper and carriage, was the exact likeness of her own mother, whose death he had so much lamented, and whose tender care of the little girl he was in hopes to see replaced by that of his new bride. But scarcely was the marriage ceremony over before his wife began to show her real temper. She could not bear the pretty little girl, because her sweet obliging manners made those of her own daughters appear 1,000 times the more odious and disagreeable. She therefore ordered her to live in the kitchen, and if ever she brought anything into the parlor, always scolded her till she was out of sight. She made her work with the servants in washing the dishes and the rubbing the tables and chairs. It was her place to clean Madame's chamber, and that of the misses, her daughters, which was all inlaid, had beds of the newest fashion, and looking glasses so long and broad that they saw themselves from head to foot in them, while the little creature herself was forced to sleep up in a sorry garret upon a wretched straw bed, without curtains or anything to make her comfortable. The poor child bore this with the greatest patience, not daring to complain to her father, who, she feared, would only reprove her, for she saw that his wife governed him entirely. When she had done all her work, she used to sit in the chimney corner among the cinders, so that in the house she went by the name of Cinder Breech. The youngest of the 2 sisters, however, being rather more civil than the eldest, called her Cinderella, and Cinderella, dirty and ragged as she was, as often happens in such cases, was 1,000 times prettier than her sisters, dressed out in all their splendor. It happened that the king's son gave a ball, to which he invited all the persons of fashion in the country. Our 2 misses were of the number, for the king's son did not know how disagreeable they were, but supposed, as they were so much indulged, that they were extremely amiable. He did not invite Cinderella, for he had never seen or heard of her. The 2 sisters began immediately to be very busy in preparing for the happy day. Nothing could exceed their joy. Every moment of their time was spent in fancying such gowns, shoes, and headdresses as would set them off to the greatest advantage. Hi. Hey, Miv. All this was new vexation to poor
Hi.
Cinderella. Hey, Yuki, welcome in. Also, thank you for the head pats. Be My Ghost Story. That is a fantastic name. All this was new vexation to poor Cinderella. Vex mentioned. For it was she who ironed and plaited her sister's linen. They talked of nothing but how they should be dressed. I, said the eldest, will wear my scarlet velvet with French trimming. And I, said the youngest, shall wear the same petticoat I had made for the last ball. But then, to make amends for that, I shall put on my gold muslin train, and wear my diamonds in my hair. With these I must certainly look well. They sent several miles for the best hairdresser that was to be had, and all their ornaments were bought at the most fashionable of shops. On the morning of the ball they called up Cinderella to consult with her about their dress, for they knew she had a great deal of taste. Cinderella gave them the best advice she could, and even offered to assist in adjusting their headdresses, which was exactly what they wanted, and they accordingly accepted her proposal. While Cinderella was busily engaged in dressing her sisters, they said to her, "Should you not like, Cinderella, to go to the
Just
ball?"
want to let you all know that you're loved, appreciated and wanted. Love you all.
"Aw, that's a very sweet message," shuddered. "Thank you." "Ah," replied Cinderella, "you're not only laughing at me." Okay. "Should you not like, Cinderella, to go to the ball?" "Ah," replied Cinderella, "you're only laughing at me. It is not for such as I am to think of going to balls." "You are in the right," said they. "Folks might laugh indeed to see a cinder breech dancing in a ballroom." Any other than Cinderella would have tried to make the haughty creatures look as ugly as she could, but the sweet-tempered girl thank you, Purple Goth Gia. But the sweet-tempered girl, on the contrary, did everything she could think of to make them look well. The sisters had scarcely eaten anything for 2 days, so great was their joy at the happy day. As the happy day drew near, more than a dozen laces were broken in endeavoring to give them a fine, slender shape, and they were always before the looking-glass. At length
before
the
you
much...
dihydrate.
Oh. You got it. Sip, sip. At length the much-wished-for moment arrived. The proud misses stepped into a beautiful carriage, and followed by servants in rich liveries, drove towards the palace. Cinderella followed them with her eyes as far as she could, and when they were out of sight, she sat down in a corner and began to cry. Her godmother, who saw her in tears, asked her what ailed her. I wish, sobbed poor Cinderella, without being able to say another word. The godmother, who was a fairy, said to her, "You wish to go to the ball, Cinderella. Is not this the truth?" "Alas, yes," replied the poor child, sobbing still more than before. Well, well, be a good girl," said the godmother, "and you shall go." Well, well, be a good girl. My goodness, said the godmother, "and you shall go." She then led Cinderella to her bedchamber and said to her, "Run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella flew like lightning and brought the finest she could lay hold of. Her godmother scooped out the inside, leaving nothing but the rind. She then struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin instantly became a fine coach gilded all over with gold. She then looked into her mouse-trap, where she found 6 mice, all alive and brisk. She told Cinderella to lift up the door of the trap very gently, and as the mice passed out, she touched them one by one with her wand, and each immediately became a beautiful horse of fine dapple gray. Of a fine dapple gray mouse color. Here, my child, said the godmother, is a coach and horses too, as handsome as your sisters. But what shall we do for a postilion? What shall we do for a postilion? I will run, replied Cinderella, and see if there be not a rat in the trap. If I find one, he will do very well for a postilion. Well thought of, my child, said her godmother. Make what haste you can. Cinderella brought the rat trap, which to her great joy contained 3 of the largest rats ever seen. The fairy chose the one which had the longest beard, and touching him with her wand, he was instantly turned into a handsome postilion with the finest pair of whiskers imaginable. She next said to Cinderella, Go again into the garden, and you will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them hither. This was no sooner done than with a stroke from the fairy's wand they were changed into 6 footmen, who all jumped up behind the coach in their laced liveries, and stood side by side as cleverly as if they had been used to nothing else the whole of their lives. The fairy then said to Cinderella, Well, my dear, is not this such an equipage as you should wish for to take you to the ball? Are you not delighted with it? Yes, replied Cinderella with hesitation. But must I go thither in these filthy rags? Her godmother touched her with a wand, and the rags instantly became the most magnificent apparel, ornamented with the most costly jewels in the whole world. To these she added a beautiful pair of glass slippers, and bade her set out for the palace. The fairy, however, before she took leave of Cinderella, strictly charged her on no account whatever to stay at the ball after the clock had struck 12, telling her that should she stay but a single moment after that time, her coach would again become a pumpkin, her horses mice, her footmen lizards, and her fine clothes be changed to filthy rags. Cinderella did not fail to promise all her godmother desired of her, and almost wild with joy drove away to the palace. As soon as she arrived, the king's son, who had been informed that a great princess whom nobody knew was come to the ball, presented himself at the door of her carriage, helped her out, and conducted her to the ballroom. Cinderella no sooner appeared than every one was silent. Both the dancing and the music stopped, and everybody was employed in gazing at the
Don't forget to
uncommon beauty.
stretch.
Yes. Okay. You got it. Big stretch. Thank goodness for mods. Little bell pepper. Sorry. Let's see. Cinderella no sooner appeared than everyone was silent. Both the dancing and the music stopped, and everybody was employed in gazing at the uncommon beauty of this unknown stranger. Nothing was heard but whispers of how handsome she is. The king himself, old as he was, could not keep his eyes from her, and continually repeated to the queen that it was a long time since he had seen so lovely a creature. I bet she loved to hear that. The ladies endeavored to find out how her clothes were made, that they might get some of the same pattern for themselves by the next day. should they be lucky enough to meet with such handsome materials and such good work people to make them. The king's son conducted her to the most honorable seat, and soon after took her out to dance with him. She both moved and danced so gracefully that everyone admired her still more than before, and she was thought the most beautiful and accomplished lady they ever beheld. After some time, a delicious collation was served up, but the young prince was so busily employed in looking at her that he did not eat a morsel. Cinderella seated herself near her sisters, paid them 1,000 attentions, and offered them a part of the oranges and sweetmeats with which the prince had presented her, while they, on their part, were quite astonished at these civilities from a lady whom they did not know. As they were conversing together, Cinderella heard the clock strike 11 3/4. She rose from her seat, curtsied to the company, and hastened away as fast as she could. As soon as she got home, she flew to her godmother, and after thanking her 1,000 times, told her she would give the world to be able to go again to the ball the next day, for the king's son had entreated her to be there. While she was telling her godmother everything that happened to her at the ball, the two sisters knocked a loud rat-tat-tat at the door, which Cinderella opened. "How late you have stayed," said she, yawning, rubbing her eyes, and stretching herself as if just awakened out of her sleep, though she had in truth felt no desire for sleep since they left her. "If you had been at the ball," said one of her sisters, "let me tell you, you would not have been sleepy. There came thither the handsomest, yes, the very handsomest princess ever beheld. She paid us 1,000 attentions, and made us take a part of the oranges and sweetmeats the prince had given her." Cinderella could scarcely contain herself for joy. She asked her sisters the name of this princess, to which they replied that nobody had been able to discover who she was, that the king's son was extremely grieved on that account, and had offered a large reward to any person who could find out where she came from. Cinderella smiled and said, "How very beautiful she must be! How fortunate you are! Ah, could I but see her for a single moment! Dear Miss Charlotte, lend me only the yellow gown you wear every day, and let me go to see her. Oh yes, I warrant you, lend my clothes to a cinder breech. Do you really suppose me such a fool? No, no, pray, Miss Forward, mind your proper business, and leave dress and balls to your betters." Cinderella expected some such answer, and was by no means sorry, for she would have been sadly at a loss what to do if her sister had lent her the clothes that she asked of her. The next day the two sisters again appeared at the ball, and so did Cinderella. But dressed much more magnificently than the night before, the king's son was continually by her side, and said the most obliging things imaginable to her. The charming young creature was far from being tired of all the agreeable things she met with. On the contrary, she was so delighted with them that she entirely forgot the charge her godmother had given her. Cinderella at last heard the striking of a clock, and counted 1, 2, 3, on till she came to 12. Though she thought that it could be but 11 at most, she got up and flew as nimbly as a deer out of the ballroom. The prince tried to overtake her, but poor Cinderella's fright made her run the faster. However, in her great hurry, she dropped one of her glass slippers from her foot, which the prince stooped down and picked up, and took the greatest care of it possible. Cinderella got home tired and out of breath, in her old clothes, without either coach or footman, and having nothing left of her magnificence but the fellow of the glass slipper which she had dropped. In the meanwhile, the prince had inquired of all his guards at the palace gates if they had not seen a magnificent princess pass out, and which way she went. The guards replied that no princess had passed the gates, and that they had not seen a creature but a little ragged girl who looked more like a beggar than a princess. Then, when the two sisters returned from the ball, Cinderella asked them if they had been as much amused as the night before, and if the beautiful princess had been there. They told her that she had, but that as soon as the clock struck 12, she hurried away from the ballroom, and in the great haste she had made, had dropped one of her glass slippers, which was the prettiest shape that could be, that the king's son had picked it up and had done nothing but look at it all the rest of the evening, and that everybody believed he was violently in love with the handsome lady to whom it belonged. This was very true. For a few days after, the prince had it proclaimed by sound of trumpet that he would marry the lady whose foot should exactly fit the slipper he had found. Accordingly, the prince's messenger took the slipper and carried it first to all the princesses, then to the duchesses, in short, to all the ladies of the court, but without success. They then brought it to the two sisters, who each tried all she could to squeeze her foot into the slipper, but saw at last that this was quite impossible. Cinderella, who was looking at them all the while, and knew her slipper, could not help smiling, and ventured to say, "Pray, sir, let me try to get on the slipper." The gentleman made her sit down, and putting the slipper to her foot, it instantly slipped in, and he saw that it fitted her like wax. The two sisters were amazed to see that the slipper fitted Cinderella, but how much greater was their astonishment when she drew out of her pocket the other slipper and put it on. Just at this moment the fairy entered the room, and touching Cinderella's clothes with her wand, made her all at once appear more magnificently dressed than they had ever seen her before. The two sisters immediately perceived that she was the beautiful princess they had seen at the ball. They threw themselves at her feet and asked her forgiveness for the ill treatment she had received from them. Cinderella helped them to rise, and tenderly embraced them, said that she forgave them with all her heart, and begged them to bestow on her their affection. Cinderella was then conducted, dressed as she was, to the young prince, who, finding her more beautiful than ever, instantly desired her to accept of his hand. The marriage ceremony took place in a few days, and Cinderella, who was as amiable as she was handsome, gave her sisters magnificent apartments in the palace, and a short time after married them to two great lords of the court. My goodness. Well, that was a much happier version of Cinderella than I have read before. Before I continue on, I am due for an ad break. We're kind of at the midway point here. So I'll go ahead and take a moment to eat some more of my esquite dip, run a quick ad, and when I come back, we'll get started on Puss in Boots. So hang tight, everyone, and I'll be right back with more stories. Alley-oop. should be back. There we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. And also, hello, Fallen. Welcome in. So we're reading another Charles Perrault. This one is called Puss in Boots. This one might be a little bit different than the modern, what is it, DreamWorks retelling, I think? I forget which studio did the Shrek films and the Puss in Boots movies. The more recent Puss in Boots movie, where he is pursuing the wishing star, is pretty interesting. Like the incorporation of other fairy tales, Little Jack Horner, the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, etc., etc. the crazy old woman with all the cats. Like, good storytelling. Let's see. There we go. Chapter 15. Puss in Boots. There was a miller who had 3 sons, and when he died, he divided what he possessed among them in the following manner. He gave his mill to the eldest, his ass to the second, and his cat to the youngest. Each of the brothers accordingly took what belonged to him without the help of an attorney, who would soon have brought their little fortune to nothing in law expenses. The poor young fellow, who had nothing but the cat, complained that he was hardly used. My brother, said he, by joining their stocks together, may do well in the world, but for me, when I have eaten my cat, Pardon? I have eaten my cat. What? But for me, when I have eaten my cat and made a fur cap of his skin, I may soon die of hunger. The cat, who all this time sat listening just inside the door of a cupboard, now ventured to come out and addressed him as follows. Do not thus afflict yourself, my good master. You have only to give me a bag and get a pair of boots made for me, so that I may scamper through the dirt and the brambles, and you shall see that you are not so ill provided for as you imagine. Though the cat's master did not much depend upon these promises, yet, as he had often observed the cunning tricks puss used to catch the rats and mice, such as hanging upon his hind legs and hiding in the meal to make believe that he was dead, he did not entirely despair of his being of some use to him in his unhappy condition. Correct. You, like, Camille Sertwich. Yeah, this is not the Shrek you remember, for sure. When the cat had obtained what he asked for, he gaily began to equip himself. He drew on his boots, and putting the bag about his neck, he took hold of the strings with his forepaws, and bidding his master take courage, immediately sallied forth. The first attempt Puss made was to go into a warren in which there were a great number of rabbits. He put some bran and some parsley into his bag, and then stretched himself out at full length as if he was dead. He waited for some young rabbits, who as yet knew nothing of the cunning tricks of the world, to come and get into the bag, the better to feast upon the dainties he had put into it. Scarcely had he lain down before he succeeded as well as could be wished. A giddy young rabbit crept into the bag, and the cat immediately drew the strings and killed him without mercy. Puss, proud of his prey, hastened directly to the palace, where he asked to speak to the king. On being shown into the apartment of his majesty, he made a low bow and said, I have brought you, sire, this rabbit from the warren of my lord the Marquis of Carabas, who commanded me to present it to your majesty with the assurance of his respect. This was the title the cat thought proper to bestow upon his master. Tell my lord Marquis of Carabas, replied the king, that I accept of his present with pleasure, and that I am greatly obliged to him. Soon after, the cat laid himself down in the same manner, in a field of corn, and had as much good fortune as before, for 2 fine partridges got into his bag, which he immediately killed and carried to the palace. The king received them as he had done the rabbits, and ordered his servants to give the messenger something to drink. In this manner he continued to carry presents of game to the king from my lord Marquis of Carabas once at least in every week. One day, the cat, having heard that the king intended to take a ride that morning by the riverside with his daughter, who was the most beautiful princess in the world, he said to his master, "If you will but follow my advice, your fortune is made. Take off your clothes and bathe yourself in the river just in the place I shall show you, and leave the rest to me." Hey, Valis, welcome in. Hello, Raiders. Hello. Should populate a video here in a second. Oh, you were playing El Abbey. Yes.
No. Yep.
Oh, that's
Okay.
still the clip of you and I when we played Bokra. Great game, by the way. There's
Oh
a sequel
God.
to that. We should
So the bear needs to
work on
go
a
where
collab
the
and play
crucifix.
that one together. But yes, El Abbey has been a really fun game. I played it on its demo, and I've been enjoying watching Valis go through all of the various ale types. Amber ale, light ale, etc. It's a good game. It's super cute. A little idle game running a monastery and brewing ale. What's not to like? But yes, hello Raiders, my name is Vexing Cat. Welcome in. I am a Tiger Librarian VTuber and I read classic literature. Currently, I'm reading Fairy Tales Every Child Should Know. And I am currently reading chapter 15, which is Puss in Boots. Also, hello Zwind. And Sino, hello! For those of you not familiar with Sino the Crocodile, he is an amazing variety streamer and super sweet, talented artist. Crocodile, 10 out of 10, would recommend. Zwind is a new friend, a new patron of the library, who recently joined Underrealm too. Another variety streamer, if memory serves. I remember the Golden Crown. I do not know much about your lore, Zwind. I should pick your brain one of these days. But I digress. We shall continue with Puss in Boots. And there's a secret in Bokra? No, there is not a secret in Bokra, not that I'm aware of. But there's a sequel, a second. There's another one that is like Bokra Planet or Bokra World or something like that. We should look at that one. I'll track that down from Steam and send a link to you. Let's see. It would be fun. I agree. Okay. Take off your clothes and bathe yourself in the river just in the place I shall show you, and leave the rest to me. The Marquis of Carabas. Marquis? I think a Marquis. The Marquis of Carabas did exactly as he was desired, without being able to guess at what the cat intended. While he was bathing, the king passed by, and Puss directly called out as loud as he could bawl, "Help! Help! My lord Marquis of Carabas is in danger of being drowned!" The king, hearing the cries, put his head out of the window of his carriage to see what was the matter, when, perceiving the very cat who had brought him so many presents, he ordered his attendants to go directly to the assistance of my lord Marquis of Carabas. While they were employed in taking the Marquis out of the water, Out of the river, the cat ran to the king's carriage and told his majesty that while his master was bathing, some thieves had run off with his clothes as they lay by the river's side, the cunning cat all the time having hid them under a large stone. The king, hearing this, commanded the officers of his wardrobe to fetch one of the handsomest suits it contained, and present it to my lord Marquis of Carabas, at the same time loading him with 1,000 attentions, as the fine clothes they brought him made him look like a gentleman, and set off his person, which was very comely, to the greatest advantage. The king's daughter was mightily taken with his appearance, and the Marquis of Carabas had no sooner cast her upon 2 or 3 respectful glances than she became violently in love with him. The king insisted on his getting into the carriage and taking a ride with them. The cat, enchanted to see how well his scheme was likely to succeed, ran before to a meadow that was reaping, and said to the reapers, "Good people, if you do not tell the king, who will soon pass this way, that the meadow you are reaping belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as mincemeat." The king did not fail to ask the reapers to whom the meadow belonged. "To my lord Marquis of Carabas," said they all at once, for the threats of the cat had terribly frightened them. "You have here a very fine piece of land, my lord Marquis," said the king. "Truly, sire," replied he, "it does not fail to bring me every year a plentiful harvest." The cat, who still went on before, now came to a field where some other laborers were making sheaves of the corn they had reaped, to whom he said as before, "Good people, if you do not tell the king, who will presently pass this way, that the corn you have reaped in this field belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as mincemeat." The king accordingly passed a moment after, and inquired to whom the corn he saw belonged. "To my lord Marquis of Carabas," answered they very glibly, upon which the king again complimented the Marquis upon his noble possessions. The cat still continued to go before, and gave the same charge to all the people he met with, so that the king was greatly astonished at the splendid fortune of my lord Marquis of Carabas. Puss at length arrived at a stately castle which belonged to an ogre, the richest ever known. For all the lands the king had passed through and admired were his. The cat took care to learn every particular about the ogre and what he could do, and then asked to speak with him, saying, as he entered the room in which he was, that he could not pass so near his castle without doing himself the honor to inquire after his health. The ogre received him as civilly as an ogre could do, and desired him to be seated. "I have been informed," said the cat, "that you have the gift of changing yourself to all sorts of animals, into a lion or an elephant, for example." "It is very true," replied the ogre somewhat sternly, "and to convince you I will directly take the form of a lion." The cat was so much terrified at finding himself so near to a lion that he sprang from him and climbed to the roof of the house, but not without much difficulty, as his boots were not very fit to walk upon the tiles. Some minutes after, the cat, perceiving that the ogre had quitted the form of a lion, ventured to come down from the tiles, and owned that he had been a good deal frightened. "I have been further informed," continued the cat, "but I know not how to believe it, that you have the power of taking the form of the smallest of animals also, for example, of changing yourself to a rat or a mouse. I confess I should think this impossible." "Impossible, you shall see." At the same instant he changed himself into a mouse, and began to frisk about the room. The cat no sooner cast his eyes upon the ogre in this form than he sprang upon him and devoured him in an instant. In the meantime, the king, admiring as he came near it the magnificent castle of the ogre, ordered his attendants to drive up to the gates, and as he wished to take a nearer view of it, the cat, hearing the noise of the carriage on the drawbridge, immediately came out, saying, "Your Majesty is welcome to the castle of my Lord Marquis of Carabas. And is this splendid castle yours also, my Lord Marquis of Carabas? I never saw anything more stately than the building, or more beautiful than the park and pleasure grounds around it. No doubt the castle is no less magnificent within than without. Pray, my Lord Marquis, indulge me with a sight of it." The Marquis gave his hand to the young princess as she alighted, and followed the king, who went before. They entered a spacious hall, where they found a splendid collation which the ogre had prepared for some friends he had that day expected to visit him, but who, hearing that the king with the princess and a great gentleman of the court were within, had not dared to enter. The king was so much charmed with the amiable qualities and noble fortune of the Marquis of Carabas, and the young princess, too, had fallen so violently in love with him, that when the king had partaken of the collation and drunk a few glasses of wine, he said to the Marquis, "It will be spelling error. It will be your own fault, my Lord Marquis of Carabas, if you do not soon become my son-in-law." The Marquis received the intelligence with 1,000 respectful acknowledgments, accepted the honor conferred upon him, and married the princess that very day. The cat became a great lord, and never after ran after rats and mice, but for his amusement. Well, that was an interesting one. Kind of wild. My goodness. I need this cat to sort out my life for me. You know, honestly, Puss in Boots seems like he's kind of got a smart head on his shoulders. Pretty wild story. What do we got here? So,
Don't forget
Sleeping
to
Beauty in the
stretch.
Wood. Yeah, big stretch. Good between chapters. That's a 10 out of 10 idea. Whoa. Oh, there we go. Gotta love it when you pop your shoulder.
Hydrate before
This
you
is-
dehydrate.
I should have seen that coming. Hydrate. You got it. So, between chapters is always the best time to remind me to take care of myself, because I forget all the time. And sometimes between chapters is the best time to take a little break. So we have how many more stories here? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more stories. I think we can easily get through.
Snack time!
Snack time, huh? Okay. I'll have a little more of this eskeet. You guys can get the crunch of the corn chip with the corn. They're very good. Roasted corn, jalapenos, onions. The sauce is kind of like a spicy smoked jalapeno something. It's got cilantro in it. It's really good. It's like honestly really good. I'm looking up at you like you would understand, or that you could see what I'm eating, but it's just really good. One more. It's so tasty. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 10 out of 10 crunch. Very good crunch. Exactly, Carrick. Exactly. Okay. We are on to chapter 16. So that is 229. We're doing pretty good today. We started at 195. Quick math. Let's see, 195. So we've read 34 pages, and there are approximately I think we'll be able to read 2 more stories today. Just looking at the math. Sleeping Beauty in the Wood, also by Charles Perrault, and Jack and the Beanstalk, also by Charles Perrault. A lot of French stories today. You were close. 34. You know, Miv, you're allowed to be wrong. Cilantro is delicious as long as you have the genes for it. For me, it does not taste like soap. So I think it tastes delicious. Anyway, we are on to chapter 16. Right? Yes. The Sleeping Beauty in the Wood. Once upon a time there was a king and a queen who grieved sorely that they had no children. When at last the queen gave birth to a daughter, the king was so overjoyed that he gave a great christening feast, the like of which had never before been known. He asked all the fairies in the land, there were 7 all told, to stand godmothers to the little princess, hoping that each might give her a gift, and so she should have all imaginable perfections. After the christening, all the company returned to the palace, where a great feast had been spread for the fairy godmothers. Before each was set a magnificent plate with a gold knife and a gold fork studded with diamonds and rubies. Just as they were seating themselves, however, there entered an old fairy who had not been invited because more than 50 years ago she had shut herself up in a tower, and it was supposed that she was either dead or enchanted. The king ordered a cover to be laid for her, but it could not be a massive gold one like the others, for only 7 had been ordered made. The old fairy thought herself ill-used and muttered between her teeth. One of the young fairies, overhearing her, and fancying she might work some mischief to the little baby, went and hid herself behind the hangings in the hall, so as to be able to have the last word and undo any harm the old fairy might wish to work. The fairies now began to endow the princess. The youngest, for her gift, decreed that she should be the most beautiful person in the world. The next, that she should have the mind of an angel. The third, that she should be perfectly graceful. The fourth, that she should dance admirably well. These seem kind of the same thing. Okay. The fifth, that she should sing like a nightingale. The sixth, that she should play charmingly upon every musical instrument. The turn of the old fairy had now come, and she declared, while her head shook with malice, that the princess should pierce her hand with a spindle and die of the wound. This dreadful fate threw all the company into tears of dismay when the young fairy who had hidden herself came forward and said, "Be of good cheer, king and queen. Your daughter shall not die, not so die. It is true I cannot entirely undo what my elder has done. The princess will pierce her hand with a spindle, but instead of dying, she will only fall into a deep sleep. The sleep will last 100 years, and at the end of that time, a king's son will come to wake her." The king, in hopes of preventing what the old fairy had foretold, immediately issued an edict by which he forbade all persons in his dominion from spinning or even having spindles in their houses, under pain of instant death. Now, 15 years after the princess was born, she was with the king and queen at one of their castles. And as she was running about by herself, she came to a little chamber at the top of a tower, and there sat an honest old woman spinning. For she had never heard of the king's edict. "What are you doing?" asked the princess. "I am spinning, my fair child," said the old woman, who did not know her. "How pretty it is!" exclaimed the princess. "How do you do it? Give it to me, that I may see if I can do it." She had no sooner taken up the spindle than, being hasty and careless, she pierced her hand with the point of it and fainted away. The old woman, in great alarm, called for help. People came running in from all sides. They threw water in the princess's face and did all they could to restore her, but nothing would bring her to. The king, who had heard the noise and confusion, came up also, and remembering what the fairy had said, he had the princess carried to the finest apartment and laid upon a richly embroidered bed. She lay there in all her loveliness, for the swoon had not made her pale. Her lips were cherry ripe, and her cheeks ruddy and fair. Her eyes were closed, but they could hear her breathing quietly. She could not be dead. The king looked sorrowfully upon her. He knew that she would not awake for 100 years. I vaguely remember my sister's ballet company doing Sleeping Beauty for one of their dance recitals. That would have been really pretty. I think that would be an amazing show in ballet. The good fairy who had saved her life and turned her death into sleep. The good fairy who had saved her life and turned her death into sleep was in the kingdom of Mataquin, 12,000 leagues away, when this happened. But she learned of it from a dwarf who had a pair of 7-league boots, and instantly set out for the castle, where she arrived in an hour, drawn by dragons and a fiery chariot. The king came. Wait. Huh? Okay, so she was talking to the dwarf. See what I mean? There just seems to be superfluous little tidbits that seem like, why is this here? It's just strange filler. So she's talking to the dwarf who had 7-league boots, and rather than using those boots to travel and traverse the distance, rolls up in a chariot drawn by dragons. Why did we talk about the dwarf at all? Or his magic boots? How did we get here? I don't know. This is just strange storytelling. By dragons in a fiery chariot. The king came forward to receive her and showed his grief. The good fairy was very wise and saw that the princess, when she woke, would find herself all alone in that great castle, and everything about her would be strange. So this is what she did. She touched with her wand everybody that was in the castle, except the king and queen. She touched the governesses, maids of honor, women of the bedchamber, gentlemen, officers, stewards, cooks, scullions, boys, guards, porters, pages, footmen. She touched the horses in the stable with their grooms, the great mastiffs in the courtyard, and even little Paust, the tiny lapdog of the princess that was on the bed beside her. As soon as she had touched them all, they all fell asleep, not to wake again until the time arrived for the mistress to do so, when they would be ready to wait upon her. Even the spits before the fire, laden with partridges and pheasants, went to sleep, and the fire itself went to sleep also. It was the work of a moment. The king and queen kissed their daughter farewell and left the castle, issuing a proclamation that no person whatsoever was to approach it. That was needless, for in a quarter of an hour there had grown up about it a wood so thick and filled with thorns that nothing could get at the castle, and the castle top itself could only be seen from a great distance. 100 years went by, and the kingdom was in the hands of another royal family. The son of the king was hunting one day when he discovered the towers of the castle above the tops of the trees, and asked what castle that was. All manner of answers were given to him. One said it was an enchanted castle, another that witches lived there, but most believed that it was occupied by a great ogre, which carried thither all the children he could catch and ate them up one at a time, for nobody could get at him through the wood. The prince did not know what to believe, when finally an old peasant said, "Prince, it is more than 50 years since I heard my father say that there was in that castle the most beautiful princess that ever was seen, that she was to sleep for 100 years, and to be awakened at last by the king's son, who was to marry her." The young prince at these words felt himself on fire. He had not a moment's doubt that he was destined to this great adventure, and full of ardor he determined at once to set out for the castle. Scarcely had he come to the wood when all the trees and thorns which had made such an impenetrable thicket opened on one side and the other to offer him a path. He walked toward the castle, which appeared now at the end of a long avenue, but when he turned to look for his followers, not one was to be seen. The woods had closed instantly upon him as he had passed through. He was entirely alone, and utter silence was about him. He entered a large forecourt and stood still with amazement and awe. On every side were stretched the bodies of men, animals apparently lifeless. But the faces of the men were rosy, and the goblets by them had a few drops of wine left. The men had plainly fallen asleep. His steps resounded as he passed over the marble pavement and up the marble staircase. He entered the guard-room. There the guards stood, drawn up, in line with carbines at their shoulders, but they were sound asleep. He passed through one apartment after another, where were ladies and gentlemen asleep in their chairs or standing.
Aslu, you just followed.
Welcome in, Aslu. Thank you for the follow. He passed through one apartment after another, where were ladies and gentlemen asleep in their chairs or standing. He entered a chamber covered with gold and saw, on a bed, the curtains of which were drawn, the most lovely sight he had ever looked upon. A princess, who appeared to be about 15 or 16, and so fair that she seemed to belong to another world. He drew near, trembling and wondering, and knelt beside her. Her hand laid upon her breast, and he touched his lips to it. At that moment, the enchantment being ended, the princess awoke, and looking drowsily and tenderly at the young man, said, "Have you come, my prince? I have waited long for you." The prince was overjoyed at the words, and at the tender voice and look, and scarcely knew how to speak. But he managed to assure her of his love, and they soon forgot all else as they talked and talked. They talked for hours. They talked for 4 hours and had not then said half that was in their heads to say.
Nolan 16_ just followed.
Welcome in, Nolan. Thank you for the follow. Meanwhile, all the rest of the people in the castle had been wakened at the same moment as the princess. They were now extremely hungry. The lady in waiting became very impatient, and at length announced to the princess that they all waited for her. Then the prince took the princess by the hand. She was dressed in great splendor, but he did not hint that she looked as he had seen pictures of his great-grandmother look. He thought her all the more charming for that. They passed into a hall of mirrors, where they supped, attended by the officers of the princess. The violins and hautboys played old but excellent pieces of music, and after supper, to lose no time, the grand almoner married the royal lovers in the chapel of the castle. You're correct, Swind. Love, homeboy just rode up and kissed her while she was asleep. You are not wrong. It's just, yeah. When they left the castle the next day to return to the prince's home, they were followed by all the retinue of the princess. They marched down the long avenue, and the wood opened again to let them pass. Outside, they met the prince's followers, who were overjoyed to see their master. He turned to show them the castle, but behold, there was no castle to be seen, and no wood. Castle and wood had vanished. But the prince and princess went gaily away, and when the old king and queen died, they reigned in their stead. So, what about, like, people had things in this castle? Like, they had clothing, they had personal effects, they had things of value and money and things aside. And what about the animals that the fairy godmother put to sleep? Did they all just disappear too? Like, brick by brick is what? I'm thinking too much about this. I'm definitely overthinking. Magic. What wizardry? Yeah, kind of wild. Okay, let's see. So we are on to chapter 37. We're about 2 hours in. I'm going to go ahead and read Jack and the Beanstalk, and then I'm going to call it for today. Just because I have more to read tomorrow, and I need a little bit of book for next week. Adora Nell. Adora Nell. It's got a little zhoosh on it. That's a cool name. Welcome in, and thank you for the follow. Thank you, everyone that stuck around from the raids. All these new followers today. This has been great. Thank you. We've got we are very close to our next follower goal. I'm very excited. My goodness. Okay, so we are on to chapter 17. Let me put that in. Yeah. Okay, we're on to chapter 17. Jack and the Beanstalk. In the days of King Alfred, there lived a poor woman whose cottage was situated in a remote country village, a great many miles from London. She had been a widow some years, and had an only child named Jack, whom she indulged to a fault. Spoiled him. She spoiled him. The consequence of her blind partiality was that Jack did not pay the least attention to anything she said, but was indolent, careless, and extravagant. His follies were not owing to a bad disposition, but that his mother had never checked him. By degrees, she disposed of all she possessed. Scarcely anything remained but a cow. The poor woman one day met Jack with tears in her eyes. Her distress was great, and for the first time in her life, she could not help reproaching him, saying, "Oh, you wicked child! By your ungrateful course of life, you have at last brought me to beggary and ruin. Cruel, cruel boy! I have not money enough to purchase even a bit of bread for another day. Nothing now remains to sell but my poor cow. I am sorry to part with her. It grieves me sadly, but we must not starve." For a few minutes, Jack felt a degree of remorse, but it was soon over, and he began teasing his mother to let him sell the cow at the next village, so much that she at last consented. As he was going along, he met a butcher, who inquired why he was driving the cow from home. Jack replied he was going to sell it. The butcher held some curious beans in his hat. They were of various colors and attracted Jack's attention. "Hello, welcome in." Let's see. They did not pass unnoticed by the butcher. This did not pass unnoticed by the butcher, who, knowing Jack's easy temper, thought now was the time to take advantage of it, and, determined not to let slip so good an opportunity, asked what was the price of the cow, offering at the same time all the beans in his hat for her. The silly boy could not conceal the pleasure he felt at what he supposed so great an offer. The bargain was struck instantly, and the cow exchanged for a few paltry beans. Jack made the best of his way home, calling aloud to his mother before he reached home, thinking to surprise her. Yeah, bro. He scammed a kid with ADHD for a cow. You're not wrong. When she saw the beans and heard Jack's account, her patience quite forsook her. She kicked the beans away in a passion. They flew in all directions. Some were scattered in the garden. Not having anything to eat, they both went supperless to bed. Jack woke early in the morning, and seeing something uncommon from the window of his bedchamber, ran downstairs into the garden, where he soon discovered that some of the beans had taken root and sprung up surprisingly. The stalks were of an immense thickness, and had so entwined that they formed a ladder nearly like a chain in appearance. Looking upward, he could not discern the top. It appeared to be lost in the clouds. He tried it, found it firm and not to be shaken. He tried it, found it firm and not to be shaken. Indeed. He quickly formed the resolution of endeavoring to climb up to the top in order to seek his fortune, and ran to communicate his intention to his mother, not doubting but she would be equally pleased with himself. She declared he should not go, said it would break her heart if he did, entreated and threatened, but all in vain. Jack set out, and after climbing for some hours, reached the top of the beanstalk, fatigued and quite exhausted. Looking around, he found himself in a strange country. It appeared to be a desert, quite barren. Not a tree, shrub, house, or living creature to be seen. Here and there were scattered fragments of stone, and at unequal distances small heaps of earth were loosely thrown together. Jack seated himself pensively upon a block of stone and thought of his mother, reflected with sorrow upon his disobedience in climbing the beanstalk against her will, and concluded that he must die with hunger. However, he walked on, hoping to see a house where he might beg something to eat and drink. Presently a handsome young woman appeared at a distance. As she approached, Jack could not help admiring how beautiful and lively she looked. She was dressed in the most elegant manner, and had a small white wand in her hand, on the top of which was a peacock of pure gold. While Jack was looking with great surprise at this charming female, she came up to him, and with a smile of the most bewitching sweetness, inquired how he came to be there. Jack related the circumstance of the beanstalk. She asked him if he recollected his father. He replied he did not, and added there must be some mystery relating to him, because if he asked his mother who his father was, she always burst into tears and appeared violently agitated. Nor did she recover herself for some days after. One thing, however, he could not avoid observing upon these occasions, which was that she always carefully avoided answering him, and even seemed afraid of speaking, as if there was some secret connected with his father's history, which she must not disclose. The young woman replied, "I will reveal the whole story, your mother must not. But before I begin, I require a solemn promise on your part to do what I command. I am a fairy. I am a fairy, and if you do not perform exactly what I desire, you will be destroyed." Jack was frightened at her menaces, but promised to fulfill her injunctions exactly, and the fairy thus addressed him. "Your father was a rich man, his disposition remarkably benevolent. He was very good to the poor and constantly relieving them. He made it a rule never to let a day pass without doing good to some person. On one particular day in the week, he kept open house and invited only those who were reduced and had lived well. He always presided himself, and did all in his power to render his guests comfortable. The rich and the great were not invited. The servants were all happy and greatly attached to their master and mistress. Your father, though only a private gentleman, was as rich as a prince, and he deserved all he possessed, for he only lived to do good. Such a man was soon known and talked of. A giant lived a great many miles off. This man was altogether as wicked as your father was good. He was in his heart envious, covetous, and cruel. But he had the art of concealing those vices. He was poor, and wished to enrich himself at any rate. Hearing your father spoken of, he formed the design of becoming acquainted with him, hoping to ingratiate himself into your father's favor. He removed quickly into your neighborhood, caused to be reported that he was a gentleman who had just lost all he possessed by an earthquake, and found it difficult to escape with his life. His wife was with him. Your father gave credit to his story and pitied him, gave him handsome apartments in his own house, and caused him and his wife to be treated like visitors of consequence, little imagining that the giant was meditating a horrid return for all his favors. Things went on in this way for some time, the giant becoming daily more impatient to put his plan into execution. At last, a favorable opportunity presented itself. Your father's house was at some distance from the seashore. But with a glass the coast could be seen distinctly. The giant was one day using the telescope. The wind was very high. He saw a fleet of ships in distress off the rocks. He hastened to your father, mentioned the circumstance, and eagerly requested he would send all the servants he could spare to relieve the sufferers. Every one was instantly dispatched, except the porter and your nurse. The giant then joined your father in the study and appeared to be delighted. He really was so. Your father recommended a favorite book and was handing it down. The giant took the opportunity and stabbed him. He instantly fell down dead. The giant left the body, found the porter and nurse, and presently dispatched them. Being determined to have no living witnesses of his crimes, you were then only 3 months old. Your mother had you in her arms in a remote part of the house, and was ignorant of what was going on. She went into the study, but how she was shocked on discovering your father a corpse and weltering in his blood. She was stupefied with horror and grief and was motionless. The giant who was seeking her found her in that state and hastened to serve her and you as he had done her husband, but she fell at his feet and in a pathetic manner besought him to spare your life and hers. Hello, Cypher Techno. Welcome in. I hope you're having a great day. Remorse, for a moment, seemed to touch the barbarian's heart. He granted your lives, but first he made her take a most solemn oath never to inform you who your father was, or to answer any questions concerning him, assuring her that if she did, he would certainly discover her and put both of you to death in the most cruel manner. Your mother took you in her arms and fled as quickly as possible. She was scarcely gone when the giant repented that he had suffered her to escape. He would have pursued her instantly, but he had to provide for his own safety, as it was necessary he should be gone before the servants returned. Having gained your father's confidence, he knew where to find all his treasure. He soon loaded himself and his wife, set the house on fire in several places, and when the servants returned, the house was burned quite down to the ground. Your poor mother, forlorn, abandoned, and forsaken, wandered with you a great many miles from this scene of desolation. Fear added to her haste. She settled in the cottage where you were brought up, and it was entirely owing to her fear of the giant that she never mentioned your father to you. I became your father's guardian at his birth, but fairies have laws to which they are subject as well as mortals. A short time before the giant went to your father's, I transgressed. My punishment was a suspension of power for a limited time, an unfortunate circumstance, as it totally prevented my succoring your father. The day on which you met the butcher, as you went to sell your mother's cow, my power was restored. It was I who secretly prompted you to take the beans in exchange for the cow. You all heard it here first. The fairy godmother from Jack and the Beanstalk is why we have ADHD. I'm gonna run with this. By my power, the beanstalk grew to so great a height and formed a ladder. I need not add that I inspired you with a strong desire to ascend the ladder. The giant lives in this country. You are the person appointed to punish him for all his wickedness. You will have dangers and difficulties to encounter, but you must persevere in avenging the death of your father, or you will not prosper in any of your undertakings, but will always be miserable. As to the giant's possessions, you may seize all you can, for everything he has is yours, though now you are unjustly deprived of it. One thing I desire. Do not let your mother know you are acquainted with your father's history till you see me again. Go along the direct road. You will soon see the house where your cruel enemy lives. While you do as I order you, I will protect and guard you. But remember, if you dare disobey my commands, a most dreadful punishment awaits you. Oh my. When the fairy had concluded, she disappeared. Leaving Jack to pursue his journey, he walked on till after sunset, when, to his great joy, he espied a large mansion. This agreeable sight revived his drooping spirits. He redoubled his speed and soon reached it. A plain-looking woman was at the door. He accosted her, begging she would give him a morsel of bread and a night's lodging. Welcome in, Lasada. She expressed the greatest surprise at seeing him, and said it was quite uncommon to see a human being near their house, for it was well known that her husband was a large and very powerful giant, and that he would never eat anything but human flesh, if he could possibly get it, that he did not think anything of walking 50 miles to procure it, usually being out the whole day for that purpose. This account greatly terrified Jack, but still he hoped to elude the giant, and therefore he again entreated the woman to take him in for one night only, and hide him where she thought proper. The good woman at last suffered herself to be persuaded, for she was of a compassionate and generous disposition, and took him into the house. First they entered a fine large hall, magnificently furnished. They then passed through several spacious rooms, all in the same style of grandeur, but they appeared to be quite forsaken and desolate. A long gallery was next. It was very dark, just light enough to show that instead of a wall on one side, there was a grating of iron, which parted off a dismal dungeon, from whence issued the groans of those poor victims whom the cruel giant reserved in confinement for his own voracious appetite. Poor Jack was half dead with fear, and would have given the world to have been with his mother again, for he now began to fear that he should never see her more, and gave himself up for lost. He even mistrusted the good woman, and thought she had let him into the house for no other purpose than to lock him up among the unfortunate people in the dungeon. At the farther end of the gallery there was a spacious kitchen, and a very excellent fire was burning in the grate. The good woman bid Jack sit down, and gave him plenty to eat and drink. Jack, not seeing anything here to make him uncomfortable, soon forgot his fear, and was just beginning to enjoy himself when he was aroused by a loud knocking at the street door, which made the whole house shake. The giant's wife ran to secure him in the oven, and then went to let her husband in. Jack heard him accost her in a voice like thunder, saying, "Wife, I smell fresh meat." "Oh, my dear," replied she, "it is nothing but the people in the dungeon." The giant appeared to believe her, and walked into the very kitchen where poor Jack was concealed, who shook, trembled, and was more terrified than he had yet been. At last the monster seated himself quietly by the fireside, whilst his wife prepared supper. by degrees, Jack recovered himself sufficiently to look at the giant through a small crevice. He was quite astonished to see what an amazing quantity he devoured, and thought he never would have done eating and drinking. When supper was ended, the giant desired his wife to bring him his hen. A very beautiful hen was then brought and placed on the table before him. Jack's curiosity was very great to see what would happen. He observed that every time the giant say lay, the hen laid an egg of solid gold. The giant amused himself a long time with his hen. Meanwhile his wife went to bed. At length the giant fell asleep by the fireside and snored like a roaring of a cannon. At daybreak, Jack, finding the giant still asleep and not likely to awaken soon, crept softly out of his hiding place, seized the hen, and ran off with her. He met with some difficulty in finding his way out of the house, but at last he reached the road with safety. He easily found the way to the beanstalk and descended it better and quicker than he expected. His mother was overjoyed to see him. He found her crying bitterly and lamenting his hard fate, for she concluded he had come to some shocking end through his rashness. Jack was impatient to show his hen and inform his mother how valuable it was. "And now, mother," said Jack.
Mokosen just followed.
"Oh, welcome in Mokosen. Thank you for the follow." "And now, mother," said Jack, "I have brought home that which will make us rich, and I hope to make you some amends for the affliction I have caused you through my idleness, extravagance, and folly." The hen produced as many golden eggs as they desired. They sold them, and in a little time became possessed of much riches as they wanted. For some months Jack and his mother lived very happily together, but he, being very desirous of traveling, recollecting the fairy's commands, and fearing that if he delayed she would put her threats into execution, longed to climb the beanstalk and pay the giant another visit, in order to carry away some more of his treasures. 1 second. Oh yeah, whoop. Too many. For, during the time that Jack was in the giant's mansion, whilst he lay concealed in the oven, he learned from the conversation that took place between the giant and his wife that he possessed some wonderful curiosities. "You're quite welcome, Mokosen." Jack thought of his journey again and again, but still he could not summon resolution enough to break it to his mother, being well assured that she would endeavor to prevent his going. However, one day he told her boldly that he must take a journey up the beanstalk. She begged and prayed him not to think of it, and tried all in her power to dissuade him. She told him that the giant's wife would certainly know him again, and that the giant would desire nothing better than to get him into his power, that he might put him to a cruel death in order to be revenged for the loss of his hen. Jack, finding that all his arguments were useless, pretended to give up the point, though resolved to go at all events. He had a dress prepared which would disguise him, and something to color his skin. He thought it impossible for anyone to recollect him in this dress. In a few mornings after this, he arose very early, changed his complexion, and, unperceived by anyone, climbed the beanstalk a second time. He was greatly fatigued when he reached the top, and very hungry. Having rested some time on one of the stones, he pursued his journey to the giant's mansion. He reached it late in the evening, the woman at the door as before. Jack addressed her at the same time, telling her a pitiful tale, and requesting that she would give him some victuals and drink, and also a night's lodging. She told him what he knew before very well, about her husband being a powerful and cruel giant, and also that she one night admitted a poor, hungry, friendless boy who was half dead with traveling, and that the little ungrateful fellow had stolen one of the giant's treasures, and ever since that, her husband had been worse than before, used her very cruelly, and continually upbraided her with being the cause of his misfortune. Jack was at no loss to discover that he was attending to the account of a story in which he was the principal actor. He did not. He did his best to persuade the good woman to admit him, but found it a very hard task. At last she consented, and as she led the way, Jack observed that everything was just as he had found it before. She took him into the kitchen, and after he had done eating and drinking, she hid him in an old lumber closet. The giant returned at the usual time, and walked in so heavily that the house was shaken to its foundation. He seated himself by the fire, and soon after exclaimed, "Wife, I smell fresh meat." The wife replied it was the crows, who had brought a piece of raw meat and left it on the top of the house. Whilst supper was preparing, the giant was very ill-tempered and impatient, frequently lifting up his hand to strike his wife for not being quick enough. She, however, was always so fortunate as to elude the blow. He was also continually upbraiding her with the loss of his wonderful hen. The giant, at last, having ended his voracious supper, and eaten till he was quite satisfied, said to his wife, "I must have something to amuse me, either my bags of money or my harp." After a great deal of ill humor, and having teased his wife some time, he commanded her to bring down his bags of gold and silver. Jack, as before, peeped out of his hiding place, and presently his wife brought 2 bags into the room. They were of a very large size. One was filled with new guineas, and the other with new shillings. They were both placed before the giant, who began reprimanding his poor wife most severely for staying so long. She replied, trembling with fear, that they were so heavy that she could scarcely lift them, and concluded at last that she would never again bring them downstairs, adding that she had nearly fainted, owing to their weight. This so exasperated the giant that he raised his hand to strike her. She, however, escaped, and went to bed, leaving him to count over his treasure by way of amusement. The giant took his bags, and after turning them over and over to see that they were in the same state as he'd left them, began to count their contents. First the bag which contained the silver was emptied, and the contents placed upon the table. Jack viewed the glittering heaps with delight, and most heartily wished them in his own possession. The giant, little thinking he was narrowly watched, reckoned the silver over several times, and then, having satisfied himself that all was safe, put it into the bag again, which he made very secure. The other bag was opened next, and the guineas placed upon the table. If Jack was pleased at the sight of the silver, how much more delighted he felt when he saw such a heap of glittering gold. Even he had the boldness to think of gaining both bags. But suddenly recollecting himself, he began to fear that the giant would sham sleep, the better to entrap anyone who might be concealed. When the giant had counted over the gold till he was tired, he put it up, if possible, more secure than he had put up the silver before. He then fell back on his chair by the fireside, and fell asleep. He snored so loud that Jack compared his noise to the roaring of the sea in a high wind when the tide is coming in. At last, Jack concluded him to be asleep, and therefore secure, stole out of his hiding place and approached the giant in order to carry off the 2 bags of money. But just as he had laid his hand upon one of the bags, a little dog, whom he had not perceived before, started from under the giant's chair and barked at Jack most furiously, who now gave himself up for lost. Fear riveted him to the spot. Instead of endeavoring to escape, he stood still, though expecting his enemy to awake every instant. Contrary, however, in his expectation, the giant continued in a sound sleep, and the dog grew weary of barking. Jack now began to recollect himself, and on looking round, saw a large piece of meat. This he threw to the dog, who instantly seized it and took it into the lumber closet, which Jack had just left. Finding himself delivered from a noisy and troublesome enemy, and seeing the giant did not awake, Jack boldly seized the bags and, throwing them over his shoulders, ran out of the kitchen. Mind you, the giantess wife could not carry these 2 bags on her own, but Jack can. Huh. Throwing them over his shoulder, ran out of the kitchen. He reached the street door in safety, found it quite daylight. Yes, plot device. In his way to the top of the beanstalk, he found himself greatly incommoded with the weight of the money bags, and really, they were so heavy that he could scarcely carry them. Jack was overjoyed. Ha! I knew. Jack was overjoyed when he found himself near the beanstalk. He soon reached the bottom and immediately ran to seek his mother. To his great surprise, the cottage was deserted. He ran from one room to another without being able to find anyone. He then hastened into the village, hoping to see some of the neighbors who could inform him where he could find his mother. An old woman at last directed him to a neighboring house where she was ill of fever. He was greatly shocked on finding her apparently dying, and could scarcely bear his own reflections on knowing himself to be the cause. On being informed of our hero's safe return, his mother by degrees revived and gradually recovered. Jack presented her with 2 valuable bags. They lived happily and comfortably. The cottage was rebuilt and well furnished. For 3 years, Jack heard no more of the beanstalk, but he could not forget it, though he feared making his mother unhappy. She would not mention the hated beanstalk, lest it should remind him of taking another journey. Notwithstanding the comforts Jack enjoyed at home, his mind dwelt continually upon the beanstalk, for the fairy's menaces, in case of his disobedience, were ever present to his mind, and prevented him from being happy. He could think of nothing else. It was in vain endeavoring to amuse himself. He became thoughtful, and would arise at the first of dawn and view the beanstalk for hours together. His mother saw that something preyed heavily upon his mind, and endeavored to discover the cause. But Jack knew too well what the consequence would be should she succeed. He did his utmost, therefore, to conquer the great desire he had for another journey up the beanstalk. Finding, however, that his inclination grew too powerful for him, he began to make secret preparations for his journey. and on the longest day arose as soon as it was light, ascended the beanstalk, and reached the top with some little trouble. He found the road, journey, etc., much as it was on the two former times. He arrived at the giant's mansion in the evening and found his wife standing, as usual, at the door. Jack had disguised himself so completely that she did not appear to have the least recollection of him. However, when he pleaded hunger and poverty in order to gain admittance, he found it very difficult to persuade her. At last he prevailed and was concealed in the copper. When the giant returned, he said, "I smell fresh meat." But Jack felt quite composed, as he had said so before, and had been soon satisfied. However, the giant started up suddenly, and notwithstanding all his wife could say, he searched all round the room. Whilst this was going forward, Jack was exceedingly terrified and ready to die with fear, wishing himself at home 1,000 times. But when the giant approached the copper and put his hand upon the lid, Jack thought his death was certain. The giant ended his search there without moving the lid, and seated himself quietly by the fireside. This fright nearly overcame poor Jack. He was afraid of moving or even breathing, lest he should be discovered. The giant at last ate a hearty supper. When he had finished, he commanded his wife to fetch down his harp. Jack peeped under the copper lid and soon saw the most beautiful harp that could be imagined. It was placed by the giant on the table, who said, "Play!" and it instantly played of its own accord. Without being touched, the music was uncommonly fine. Jack was delighted, and felt more anxious to get the harp into his possession than either of the former treasures. The giant's soul was not attuned to harmony, and the music soon lulled him into a sound sleep. Now, therefore, was the time to carry off the harp, as the giant appeared to be in more profound sleep than usual. Jack, soon determined, got out of the copper and seized the harp. The harp was enchanted by a fairy. It called out loudly, "Master! Master!" The giant awoke, stood up, and tried to pursue Jack, but he had drank so much that he could hardly stand. Poor Jack ran as fast as he could. In a little time the giant recovered sufficiently to walk slowly, or rather to reel after him. Had he been sober, he must have overtaken Jack instantly. But, as he then was, Jack contrived to be first at the top of the beanstalk. The giant called after him in a voice like thunder, and sometimes was very near him. The moment Jack got down the beanstalk, he called out for the hatchet. One was brought him directly. Just at that instant the giant was beginning to descend, but Jack, with his hatchet, cut the beanstalk close off at the root, which made the giant fall headlong into the garden. The fall killed him, thereby releasing the world from a barbarous enemy. Jack's mother was delighted when she saw the beanstalk destroyed. At this instant, the fairy appeared. She first addressed Jack's mother and explained every circumstance relating to the journeys up the beanstalk. The fairy charged Jack to be dutiful to his mother and to follow his father's good example, which was the only way to be happy. She then disappeared.
Gloop
Oh.
Queen just followed.
Hello. Welcome in, Gloop Queen. Thank you for the follow. Jack heartily begged his mother's pardon for all the sorrow and affliction he had caused her, promising most faithfully to be very dutiful and obedient to her for the future. The end. Or at least the end for us today. So we are on Jack. That was Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack the Giant Killer. So these are different stories. Interesting. The more you know. we did in fact need that for the story to happen. Yeah. It was par for the course. Anyway, we are at an end for today. Gloop Queen, yes. That does in fact count as your inside voice, but honestly, I'm not hearing anyone talking in my library, so I think we're okay. Though if you do use the TTS, that will make my attention. But yes, welcome in. Tyraine, please clap clap. Woo! Yes, Jack and the Beanstalk was a good one. I think of today's stories, Jack and the Beanstalk was the most well thought out, and I thought that was an interesting idea that it took years. Like instead of like days, it took years for Jack to gather up the treasures and fool the giant before taking the last item and escaping. I think that's fascinating. But I am a little disappointed that we start off strong. We have magic hen that lays golden eggs. Cool. And we end with singing magic harp that plays itself. Right? Also cool. But in the middle, we just have a bag of gold and a bag of silver. And it's not like they replenish themselves or they magically make more money or like do something unique, right? This is a bag of silver, pour it out, that's it. Put it back in the bag of gold, pour it out, that's it. Put it back in the bag. It's just kind of like, oh, okay. Why would you even need these two particular items if you have the eggs from the hen to get more money and you could have concerts for the harp to play and generate revenue? I don't know. Pardon me. Let's go ahead and find somebody to raid out to, and then we will be back with Jack the Giant Killer tomorrow. I will be reading same time, 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. British summertime, I think is the conversion rate on that. So let's see, who do we have? Bum bum ba ba ba. Same category. We should have a couple other readers out there. So we've got somebody's writing. Comunidad de Anilo, so Spanish. Reading Warrior, Cats, Rising Thunder, interesting. Oh yes, those take me back. Those were good stories. Let's see. This one's in German. So many more people are using this category. It makes me so happy. Some are still improperly using it, and that's okay. I think we can do better. Maiko Psycho is reading Wind State of Wonder. And I think to myself, what a wonderful... What the fuck? That was funny. Game of Tomes. I'm not sure what they're reading. Friendly reminder to all my booktubers that are reading out there, be sure to put the book title that you are reading from in your stream, because it makes it a lot easier to find the appropriate story. Let's see. Got a few folks out there. They're playing Okami. They're doing a partner push. Arrow is playing Ferb. We're getting the band back together. Moog is reading. Okay, we haven't done that. Done a raid into Moog. Moog was kind enough to raid into me recently, so I feel like that would be super, super nice paying it forward and go back to Moog. So everyone, hang on tight. Exclamation point raid. Let's see if this works. I wrote this. I don't know if it'll work. Hey, look at that. We did it. It works. Be sure to grab the raid message. All you followers out there can use the raid emote. That is a follower exclusive. So, I'm gonna grab all of that. Interesting. Okay. I know, with my professional streamer tech. I think that's funny. Okay, so we've got Campfire Bedtime Stories by Moog, who is super sweet, by the way. So let's go ahead and raid it into Moog, grab your raid message, and we'll head over and say hello. Uno momento. Okay, there it is. So we're going to start that raid. You are very welcome. If you guys want more stories, you'll catch me same time, same place tomorrow. We'll see you then. Da 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 da.